Welcome to Ability Assistance. My name is Phyllis Jones, Chair of the North Andover Commission on Ability Assistance.
My name is Stacey Leibowitz. I'm the Secretary of the North Andover Commission on Ability Assistance.
Our guest today is Essex County District Attorney Paul Tucker. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation.
This has been a while in the making. I think we
Yes.
booked this episode maybe 6 months ago at
Yes.
this
Think
point.
so.
Yes, we did.
We're happy to have
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
So let's start out with why do you get into the field of law?
Well, I've been at this a long time. I had 34 years in law enforcement, 32 of them in Salem, Massachusetts. Most of my career I was a detective, and I was in charge of the what we call the Criminal Bureau, the Detective Division. And then for the last 6 years, I was the police chief. And I decided to run for office, something I never thought I would do. And I was elected state representative from Salem. I served 4 terms, 8 years. And when I was finishing up my 8th year, the then District Attorney John Blodgett had decided to retire. So fortunately, 23 years ago, I had graduated law school and passed the bar, so it gave me the opportunity to run for District Attorney. It's something that I thought that I could use the skill set that I developed over the experience and education I've had over many years, and here I am just about wrapping up my first year in office. So it's been a very long but very rewarding career of over 40 years now, and I think that the men and women of the Essex County DA's office do incredibly important work on behalf of the citizens of Essex County, so I'm happy to be part of the team.
And tell us a little bit about the work that you're currently doing in your position currently.
So we have a staff of about 170 people. It's about roughly 85 attorneys and 85 support staff. And we staff the district courts, the Superior Court. Within the office, we have an appeals unit. We also have a couple really important units too. One is the juvenile justice unit, working with folks and frankly trying to divert kids out of the system.
Right.
We know that the longer we can keep somebody out of the system, particularly at that young age, those emerging adults, and we've done a lot of work in this area. Our juvenile justice unit does incredible, really good work, not only in juvenile diversion, but we've put an emphasis this year on restorative justice. And
What does that mean?
so restorative justice basically means you're trying to repair some damage that was done by a person or some people to the victim of a crime. And what restorative justice does, it actually gets people together in the same room. I'll give you a quick story. So a couple of young kids broke into a small store. The owner of the store, once the kids were found out by the police, didn't want to prosecute, but he said something very interesting. He said, I want them to be accountable, I just don't want them to have a record. So under restorative justice, they literally sat across the table from each other, and the store owner got to tell the impact of the crime on his business, his sole employee who didn't get paid for the day because they had to shut down, the feeling that his family had, how he felt when he came to work that day. And these 2 young people got to, number 1, express remorse, but 2, really explain why they made a really not so good decision.
Right.
And this was a learning lesson. That's a good example of restorative justice.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
What is the age group that you usually put that towards?
Yeah, we're really looking right now, I'd say 14 to 22.
Okay.
And then maybe a separate model for older young adults, early 20s. We know that the brain science development, we know the issues around development, generally around the age of 25. We know that kids make impulsive decisions. We also know that there has to be some accountability. And I think that balance is a big part of my job and the staff that we have to make sure that we use it appropriately. So our juvenile justice unit does that. The other piece is a unit called the Victim Witness Services. And think about how daunting it must be to either be the victim of a crime or a witness of a crime. Courthouses can be very difficult places to be in.
Yes.
It gets magnified if you're unfortunately dragged into that system as a victim or a witness. So our VW folks are phenomenal. Maureen Leal is the head of our VW services. We will support anybody they might have been the victim of a minor crime, a misdemeanor, all the way up to family members who have lost a loved one to violence. And the feedback that I get from folks about our VW services and the juvenile justice it's really one of the things that makes this job worthwhile, and I think we do a really good job
That's
at it.
really
And
amazing.
that is extremely proactive
Yeah.
because you have people from all different walks of life
Yes,
in terms of juveniles. And then I'm sure, unfortunately, a lot of these juveniles are possibly themselves victims
Yes.
of other crimes.
oftentimes,
Yeah,
yes.
And so they're acting out
Yep.
because they themselves have been victims and they don't know how to go someplace and say,
Right.
this happened to me, I need
Yep.
help. Instead, they come out with other anger issues.
Right.
Yeah, very much. And I also think that we've had a little bit of an enlightenment where I think we need to look at what's happening with these kids in terms of equity and opportunity. What
Right.
opportunities have they had, or frankly, in most cases, not had,
right.
that some other folks may have had? I saw a great video about opportunity where they lined everybody up at a starting line for a race. It was supposed to be a fair
I've seen
race. But everybody that had opportunities got to take a step forward, a step forward. And by the time the race started, it wasn't a fair race.
Yeah.
Right,
That's
right.
what we see, and I hope that analogy works for folks, that example. That's what we're trying to do, to make sure that we give kids opportunities. Just this year, in my first year, we've sponsored a number of community programs for kids. In Lawrence, this summer, we ran a flag football for 75 kids. We ran a camp for 200 kids in Peabody.
Amazing.
We did a fishing program with the Gloucester Police Department, bringing kids out fishing. And it's not so much to catch a fish, although that was great. It's about spending 2 or 3 hours, a group of 5 or 6 kids, at-risk youth with police officers, Bonnie.
Right.
We're trying to do a lot of those kinds of things.
And showing
And that's
them
so
that
important.
the officers aren't the bad guys.
Right.
They're not
Exactly.
out
That's
to
the
get
goal.
you.
Exactly,
goal.
that they're here to help,
Yes,
they're here to support,
yep,
and maybe give those juveniles another pathway someplace
yes,
else.
very well said. And, you know, we do those kinds of things. I think oftentimes people tend to think of district attorney's office as prosecutors. We're gonna
Yes,
put
right.
people in jail, we're gonna punish people. Frankly, a big part of my job is keeping people
Out
out
of
of
jail.
jail
Out of jail.
when appropriate. Now, clearly, some people engage in behavior, there has to be
Right,
consequences.
right.
But if we can divert kids, somebody during the campaign last year said to me, better outcomes for offenders is better outcomes for society.
Right.
The more we can do for these folks in terms of programming and opportunity, the better we are long-term.
Yes.
And-
That's been a big focus of the office as well.
And I think that's a really good segue into another issue that affects youth, affects people of all ages, and that's dealing with drug addiction and mental health concerns, which also, you know,
All
is kind of
feed
a
into-
domino
yeah.
effect with youth who are growing up in underserved or, you know, very bad
Especially in this
family
post-COVID.
situations.
Yes.
So if you can elaborate more on that piece.
I'm happy to, and I think one of the benefits of a show like this, frankly, is to help educate the public as to what's
Yes.
happening.
That's
That's
our-
exactly
So-
why we did
And
this
that's,
show.
All
and that's
purpose.
why I've been looking forward to coming. So I take a bit of the long view. I started in police work in 1981, and back then, it was about punishment,
Yep.
it was
yes.
about arrests, it was about long-term sentences, and honestly, folks who were unfortunately in the grip of addiction were caught up in this punishment, and I think we got it wrong for a long
Yes.
time. We missed the treatment piece, we missed the rehabilitation piece. We today, in 2023, I think are in a much better position than we were. Now you also take in many of the mental health challenges that
Yes.
folks are having.
Yes.
So when I was the police chief, we created a unit in Salem called the Community Impact Unit. And their specific charge by me was, let's work with these folks that are in the
Yes.
shadows, these folks that were continually cycling in and out of the system. People very often had some mental health issues, they had the substance use issues.
Yes.
And what would happen back then, in 2009, when I became chief and created this unit, what we saw was these same folks that were cycling in and out.
Yep.
So you've got somebody on the streets of Salem, where I work, that were picked up for what we call quality of life crimes, drinking in public, urinating in public, trespassing, you know, all these things that are on the lower end of the spectrum. But what would happen is they would miss court, they would fail to appear, and they would end up being held. They would go in Middleton at the cost of thousands of dollars a month. After 3 or 4 months, 5 months, come back out, presenting back on the streets in Salem,
And
The
then
same
back
cycle.
again.
and cycling
Same
back again.
cycle, yeah.
So one of the things that we wanted to do was make sure we got services. We were the first department that I know of, and I know it's been replicated. We hired 2 mental health clinicians to work, not to replace the police, but to work alongside them.
Right.
We have that
right.
here in town as
I'm
well.
very
Right.
proud of the work that
Partnership.
Chief Gray has done here in
Yes.
North Andover with the community support folks. I know Deanna and Crystal, they're doing excellent work.
Yeah.
I've looked at all the
Yes.
things they've done. What they're doing here in North Andover and in other places, but particularly with the North Andover, with the support group, which frankly is great because it works out of the police department, they're removing barriers. There's so many impediments to trying to get help for folks. You know, you take a look at what they're doing here in North Andover, it's critically important. And, you know, not to overstate this too much, but some of this work it's literally life-saving.
Yes.
It's
yeah,
life-saving work, and I don't
Absolutely.
want to,
No,
I don't
no,
want to,
Yeah.
you're not overstating
Yeah.
anything.
yeah. And very, very proud of the work that they're doing here, and I think a lot of police departments, a lot of the models look different. Lynn Police just started something, they have a community response team. Generally the same, but maybe with just a few differences. I think that if there's some unique challenges to communities,
Right.
they're able
Right,
to do
right.
it, so.
Right.
No, that makes sense. And, I mean, we had Deanna on years ago. We
Yep,
might
yep.
actually need to bring her back
Yeah.
on. I'm sure that program has, you know, blossomed since then.
Absolutely.
And she actually came back to me. We sat down and had pizza one day.
Yeah.
And she came back to me and she said, Phyllis, because of being on the program, I had 2 or 3 families reach out to me.
Yeah.
And I shared that with you,
Yeah, I
and
remember
for
that.
us, that
Yeah,
was
it's huge.
that was profound.
Yeah. It really made an impact.
Yeah, Deanna very kindly sent me some information yesterday of some of the things that they're doing, and, you know, to make sure that folks know about the 988, the national
Yes.
hotline number,
Yep.
the services that are available here for folks in North Andover. I'm very proud of the fact that communities like North Andover are being proactive. You know, I think for too long, it was somebody else's problem.
Exactly.
Right? It was, you know, my son or my daughter or my brother, you know, they don't
Yeah.
have mental health
Yeah.
issues. They don't have substance use issues. And, you know, the way people explain that, which makes a lot of sense to me, if you go to the emergency room with a broken arm or a broken
Yeah,
foot,
It's the same idea.
they can see it, they can
Yeah.
fix it.
Exactly.
same
Mental
idea.
health is one of
Yep.
those things that people do not
Yeah.
understand.
Right.
You can't walk in and they take an X-ray
Right.
Right.
and then they put,
It's not a visible illness. There are
Exactly.
so many hidden illnesses, and drug
Yeah.
addiction, mental illness, and drug addiction are not mutually exclusive.
Correct.
They go hand in hand
Yeah.
all the
but
time.
not all
Yeah.
the time.
But not all the time.
Yeah.
So it's that hidden piece.
Yes.
That, and I guess that brings up another question of how do you work with, you know, providers out there?
Yes.
Because obviously we're looking at a shortage right
Yes.
now of staff. There are so many issues in getting services. What does that look like?
I'll tell you right up front, Stacey, one of the biggest problems, and I'll call it a frustration that
Yeah.
I've had in my
Yeah.
first year as DA, is the lack of services.
Yeah.
And I could
Speaking
tell you.
as a parent
Yeah.
who's had to experience
And as
that.
a
You've s-
sibling,
You've seen it
Yes.
firsthand, both of you.
Yes.
sibling, yeah.
And, you know, in my years as a state representative, I would get calls from families who had minor children boarded in emergency rooms for sometimes
Yeah,
weeks at a
yeah,
time,
yeah.
getting no services.
During
simply
COVID, it was almost a
It's
month.
a nightmare.
Being warehoused.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, I would get involved and do my best to get some services, but it shouldn't have to come to that.
Right.
You shouldn't have to be calling your state representative or state senator to access these services. That's what I mentioned earlier in the show on the equity piece.
Yes.
You know, some folks having other opportunities. I will tell you, I worry about the lack of services. We have in our juvenile diversion program, there is a component for mental health, either screening and if services are called for. We have kids that can't complete the program because we're struggling to find a provider.
Yeah.
So one of the things we've done, and, you know, you can't be too proud to ask for help, we've reached out to Merrimack Valley Family Services, and they have been incredibly responsive to us. Folks like that, around our way, Elliott Community Health on the North Shore, closer to Salem, the folks are out there. The problem is that I think the lack of services has become a real problem. This is real. This is impacting
Oh,
so
no,
many.
I was
we're-
actually reading, my daughter sent me the article, I guess kids who are in DCF custody right now, they're boarding at Boston
Yeah,
Children's
yeah.
for months on end.
Yeah.
They don't need
Yeah.
a hospital
But they don't know what to do with
like
them.
that.
They don't
They
know what to
might-
do
yeah.
to put them in a safer situation, and not to get too much into the weeds, but there's this, again, domino effect where staffing is an issue. You have a
Yes.
lack,
Yes.
and that's really, I mean, that existed before COVID, but now it's a nightmare since COVID.
Yeah.
And
That-
especially with the youth.
Yes.
The youth are probably the most
Youth mental health
underserved.
services.
Yes.
It's
And-
across the
And
board.
I've seen it, you know, God bless our educators, our public school
Yeah.
teachers. The work that they're doing, the job that they're doing now,
Yeah.
teachers from 50 years ago probably wouldn't recognize the challenges that our public
Right.
school teachers
Are
are
dealing with
facing.
now.
And I still think, my personal opinion, I don't think that we've seen the tip of the wave yet
No,
post-COVID.
no, we haven't.
If you take a look at, every summer there's learning loss. Kids, when they leave school in June and come back, there's learning loss.
Yeah,
That has been exacerbated so much by COVID.
yeah,
We've got kids that lost almost 2 full years
yeah,
of really good, true education.
yeah.
And our public school educators stepped up, they did the best they can. They will tell you that the mental health challenges that we're seeing, my daughter is a second-year teacher at Salem High School, and we talk about this all the time. She worries about every one of her students and some of the
And
things that we're seeing.
most teachers are concerned.
Yes.
Yep, they are.
And it is a different level of education that the teachers need
Yeah,
to be able to teach the neurotypical kids versus the kids who
Yep.
might be on
Neurodivergent,
IEPs
Sure.
because
yeah.
there are different levels.
Yes.
And then you've got the situation where when school systems are able to send the kids out of district,
yeah,
there aren't as many desks available
Right.
because if you bring 30 kids into a single classroom, well,
Yes.
that sort of defeats the whole purpose of taking them out of district
Yeah.
to begin with.
And then you take all of these challenges against the backdrop of what's happening in the world, because
Right.
everything affects
Right.
our kids, from
Yes.
it's a,
music to TV shows to
Yeah.
news. We see it every single day.
yeah.
And,
And social media,
social
social
media
media has just
has been a
exacerbated it
tremendous challenge
a
for us.
million times.
It really has. And then, the mental health piece touches so many demographics.
Yeah,
The elderly who have been
Yes.
victims.
yeah,
The amount of scams and fraud being perpetrated against the
Oh my
elderly
That's a
right
really
now.
good
The
point.
amount of calls I
Yep.
get where, now, I'll admit, sometimes I like to have fun with these people because I need, I need
Same
two,
here.
2 minutes of, comic relief. And they'll call me and they'll say, there's a warrant out for your arrest.
Yeah,
And
You
I'm a
haven't paid
licensed
your
attorney.
taxes.
So, I mean, in fact, we went to the same law
That's right,
school.
we did.
Just at different
Very
times.
proudly.
Yes, Mass School of Law
Yep.
in Andover. And, so they'll call and they're like, there's a warrant out for your arrest. And I'm like, oh my goodness, please tell me, who issued the warrant and what is it about? Because I need to call the chief of police and let them know where I am so they know where to find me. But I'm having fun.
Yeah.
I can recognize that.
right.
But
But somebody who's older.
Unfortunately, a lot,
Most-
particularly
Yeah,
elderly.
somebody who doesn't,
Yes.
they're older, they don't
They're-
have the
they're
cognitive
scared.
understanding anymore.
Yeah.
they're scared, or
Yeah.
they're somehow tricked to giving out their social
Yeah.
security
Or
numbers.
you have to buy
or-
all these gift cards.
So
to-
many
Yes.
scams,
Yeah.
Bitcoins, fraudulent, buy
Yeah.
the cards, everything.
Yeah.
I got a call the other day on my work phone. It was a young man's voice. Grandpa, it's me, your grandson. I need
With
help. You need to send me
AI.
money. And I
Oh
said,
my
I think you'll be
goodness.
okay, son.
Yeah.
But just, I got it on my own, on my work phone.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
And it's the use of AI now, and that's a whole nother discussion,
Yeah.
how they are
Yeah.
using that to augment people's voices.
That's
And
right.
if you're not savvy or you've had that, so
Yeah.
it wouldn't even just be the elder population, you're dealing with those who have cognitive, developmental disabilities,
Yes.
who may also not understand.
Yeah.
Or people who are
So,
either non-native speakers,
Yeah.
correct. Yes.
whether or not they're here with or
they may
without
not
paperwork.
understand.
Now, these people are even more, at risk.
Very
because
vulnerable.
They're extremely
Yes.
vulnerable. They're
Yes.
afraid now somebody's going to knock on their door. They're working 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet.
Yep.
They're good people. They don't do anything wrong in the community. And now all of a sudden, they're afraid somebody's going to knock on
Yeah.
the door and throw them
Yeah.
in jail,
Yeah.
and they haven't done anything.
Yeah, when I was the police chief in Salem, we made sure that we reached out to the immigrant community and said, we care if you're a victim of a crime.
Yeah.
That's first and
Yes.
foremost. We don't
Yeah.
want anybody being victimized. And we
Right.
were very proactive about it, as I think most departments in Massachusetts are, if not all. I think we do a pretty good job with that. But so much of the mental health issues have touched everywhere.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I never want to miss the opportunity to mention as well is I worry about the mental health of our first responders, our police
Yes.
officers, our
Thank you,
firefighters.
thank you, yes.
Having been on the job a long time, seen a lot, I can tell you the difference now and the recognition. When I first started, there were some terrible things that happened in Salem. I was a brand new patrolman that I had to handle, and honestly, there was no mental health outlet. You either went out and either went to a bar afterwards, or you went home and had it all
Right.
bottled up. Now we have a recognition. We do critical incident stress management. We have peer counseling. We have come so far. We've had cases in this community, in the neighboring communities,
Right.
where our first responders have seen some really tough things.
Yes.
I can
And
imagine.
I think that we have finally hit a place where we recognize that. You know, our police officers, our firefighters, our EMS folks, they're doing incredibly difficult work, and everybody
Similar
is
to
touched
our
by
armed
this.
services when they're in,
Exactly.
Yes.
when they're in active
Same.
duty,
Very similar.
which is why I so much love the fact that Deanna's here and in communities similar to that.
Yes.
And in fact, I had gone a couple of years ago, there was a program that was set up by, I forget which college it was, in Beverly, Endicott?
Endicott College.
Yes, and
yep.
they
Yep.
brought in the then Essex County police department
Yes.
and everybody. And one of the people there was somebody from one of the, I think it's the Flutie Foundation, where their focus is on autism.
Right.
Yes.
And they were giving out these fantastic stickers to be able to put on your car
Yeah.
or seatbelt covers,
Yes.
so that, you know, you're going to a car, the car's rolled over. The parent who's there knows what's going on, but they're unable to communicate. Now you have a individual maybe in the back seat
Yes.
who's got autism. They're being, you know, triggered by the lights. They're being triggered by the sounds. They're being triggered by the situation. And the last thing an officer wants to do in that situation is make the situation worse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I can't even imagine what an officer would go through if they found out they wrestled to the ground unnecessarily
Right.
somebody with autism
Yeah.
who they don't understand what's
Yeah.
going on.
Exactly.
I'm glad you brought that up, Phyllis, because when I was at the State House, I worked really closely with the ARC of Mass, with Morris Sullivan, Charlie Fisk, Leo Sarkeesian, and they do amazing work. And one of the pieces of legislation that I was able to author and pass was police training, dealing with folks with special populations,
yep.
mainly autism, folks on the spectrum. So what we were able to pass was in police academies in Massachusetts now, for new police officers, there's a special block of training in how to handle folks with special populations.
That's fantastic.
Oftentimes,
Yeah,
your
so
police
important.
officer sees something, and the first thought, maybe we gotta go
Right.
hands-on. We're
Right,
gonna
right.
start
They
this.
jump right in. They jump right in.
And what we've done with the training, and now we've incorporated that into ongoing, what we call the in-service
Yeah.
training. We've done the same thing, and my hat's off to the police training agencies that embrace this right from the
Yep.
beginning. We're actually able to embed that in the statute. So there is a recognition. I think we're doing
Yes.
so much better. So,
And that's good for the people who are out there, but also good for the first responders.
Yes,
Because, like I said, I can't even imagine what an officer or a firefighter or somebody in an ambulance would go through if they found out
right.
after the fact that what they
Right.
did was excessive for that
Yes.
person.
And it was those stories that led us to the legislation. So I think we're in a
Thank
much
you
better
for doing
place.
that.
Good. I'm very, very proud of the work we've done. And the ACOMAS, they're just incredibly
They
great
are.
folks.
They're
that
amazing
I
to
can't
work
say enough
with.
about them. And North Shore ACA on our way with Joanne Simons, the work they're doing is phenomenal, so.
No, in fact, I've reached out several times. Hopefully they'll see this program and realize that we'd like to have them on.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that'd be great. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was going to ask, I guess going back a little bit more to the, jail system.
Yep.
What is your involvement now with diversion programs in your current capacity?
So diversion is one of our top priorities.
Mm-hmm.
And not only diversion, I think when people think of juvenile diversions, keeping the kids out, we actually have not only raised the cap, but we've diverted folks, first-time offenders who are well into adulthood. Somebody that,
Right.
you know what, they made a mistake that they shouldn't have made.
Right.
And we worry, because if somebody gets a record, it follows you all the way through.
Yes.
Young kids, they do something that gets a
Right.
record, it follows them for jobs, if they want to join the military, for housing.
Exactly.
If
Their
we
their quarries are forever.
Corey stays,
forever.
it lives forever out there. And if I can actually even, Stacey, take it one step further, and that is the mental health work that's being
Yeah, I
done
was going to,
for folks behind the walls. I know Sheriff Coppinger at Essex County Sheriff has done quite a bit of work with this. And one of the things that really impacted me as I took on this job was a documentary film that I had seen a few years back. In Salem, we have a film fest every year, and you can pick and choose the films. And there was a documentary on wasn't Massachusetts, one of the New England states, in solitary confinement.
Yeah.
And it was a very, very graphic documentary, no holds barred. And you could see in solitary confinement the breakdown. It was all men, so
Yeah.
you could see the breakdown of these men in a fairly short period of time. Some pretty tough guys
Yeah.
that just became a shell of themselves. The good news is, as the documentary went along, they introduced quite a bit of intensive mental health programming. So by the end of this 3-year cycle that they had done, the number of folks in solitary had dropped way down. And, you know, it doesn't make any sense with somebody who's doing hard time like that,
Yeah.
with no mental health help.
To then inflict it on them.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
and then some of these folks are being released to the street because their sentence is up.
So then the recidivism, I could say that 10
Yeah.
times
Yeah.
fast,
Yeah.
goes up because
zooms.
of that. So
Yeah.
you're not helping somebody when they come in and they already, because the concern is they already have some kind of a mental health
Yes.
concern
Yep.
/ addiction.
Yep.
And what does that look like? So you're trying to address that, but if they're put in solitary confinement, and there's so many issues
Yes,
with that,
Yeah.
and even if they don't have a mental health issue, they're going to develop one.
Yes.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
addressing that is, I would imagine, a top concern. I would hope that it's not something that happens constantly, but it seems like it is a
Yeah,
tool
'cause
that is used
there
by
are-
the
There
judicial
are some
system.
people that, no matter what you do, you're never going to be able.
Right, you're not going to
Yeah.
reach them.
It's a very, very difficult balance, and I give the professionals who run our correctional
Yeah.
system,
It's not
you
an
know,
easy
again,
job.
compare where we are now compared to where we were
Right.
Yes.
some time ago. And we did, when I was at the State House as a rep, we did criminal justice reform in 2018. And one of the pieces in that you would see if you look was some solitary confinement
Right.
reform. And that's some of the pieces that I worked on to try to do the best that we could. And again, this can be obviously a very difficult population as well.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, whatever we do, it has to be done with humanity.
Yeah,
So,
I'd like to circle back around your victim assistance unit.
yes,
Attorney walking into court doesn't faze me. Another adult walking into a court to do something might not faze them. But even as an attorney, if
Yeah.
I was the victim of something,
yes,
I'd
Yeah.
probably be a little, because now all of a sudden,
Reticent, yep.
I'm not attorney Phyllis Jones. I'm Phyllis Jones, the victim of fill in the blank.
yeah,
Right.
Okay? So my guard's down, I'm afraid, I'm scared, even though I know the court system.
yes, yeah.
What happens?
Yeah, and people would
Yeah.
think because you're an attorney of many years that you'll be more well-equipped to handle this. It's
And-
daunting.
And it is daunting.
Yeah.
We had, about 12 years ago, a North Andover police officer showed up at our front door on a Saturday morning. My husband pulled me out of the shower, and the first thing I said was, "Excuse me, officer, what is my role here? Am
Yeah.
I Attorney Phyllis Jones, or am I Mrs. Phyllis
Yes.
Jones?"
Yep.
And he said, "You're definitely Mrs."
Yep.
And it was to tell us that my father-in-law had committed suicide in
Mm.
Beverly, and he wanted to
Uh-oh.
do it in person versus a
Right.
phone call.
Yeah.
But that
Yeah.
snaps.
Yes,
Right,
Yep.
right.
yeah. And now you take somebody who doesn't have your legal experience or background,
Yeah.
and it just makes it really difficult.
Yeah.
So what our victim witness folks will do is do our best, and they do a really good job, even before that person steps into court, to give them sort of the landscape.
Yep.
This is what you can expect, this is what's gonna happen. It's really difficult for witnesses to get up on a witness stand. I mean, you have
Yeah, it's
experience.
tough. It's-
You know, so we want to make sure that they are as physically, mentally, and emotionally prepared as they can be. We've had folks, just in the 1 year I've been in this job, we've had some folks that had to testify about some really difficult things, very emotional. But I will say to a person, every time that they finish, and I have some interaction, because I go up to the court and I talk to these folks afterwards, particularly if it's a murder case, every single time, they will say that it was the victim witness folks that got them
Right.
through.
That's
So,
fantastic
It
to
is
hear.
good. You know, when I first got sworn in, one of the things that I asked every employee to do was to write me a letter and explain to me what your job is, what you do, why you have this job. And the folks from Victim Witness, the things that they wrote in the letters, and I read every one of them, 170 plus.
Wow.
The folks from the Victim Witness Department that wrote the letters to me of what they do and why they do it, I wish I could share with everybody. It's not just a job. I know
No,
there's
no, it's
cliches,
personal.
you know.
But it's personal.
It is. It is, and the work that they do,
And you typically find that with public service employees
I think so
Yeah.
too.
anyway.
I think so too.
I mean, I have to
Yeah.
say, I wish, kind of bouncing off of what you said, that something like that existed for me when I was younger.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because as an 11-year-old in the 1970s, I'm dating myself, I had to testify against a family member for abuse.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the same situation. I didn't have the same
Yeah.
protection.
Yeah.
And it was a horrifying experience for me, to be honest. And the case was actually thrown out, which made it even worse because I
It's
felt
tough.
like a failure.
Yeah.
And having somebody
And
who could
nobody
hold my
should
hand.
be in that.
No. And I will never forget that. And honestly, I will openly say I personally have such a discomfort going into courtrooms
Yeah.
for any reason.
Yeah.
So
It never left you, it stayed with
it
you.
never left, and it doesn't leave. And I'm much older now. It's so having that, seeing how the justice system has evolved to address that, what you're doing is critical. And I guess that leads me to my next question of how do you share that with the public? What is your role and your department's role with sharing these details with
Especially
people?
people of violent crimes.
Yes. Yeah.
I have one friend, she was raped twice. And again, back in the
Yeah.
80s and 90s,
Yeah.
and she wouldn't come forward because
The
you know,
stigma, the fear.
what evidence do you
Yeah.
Yeah.
have?
Yeah. I view one of the most important components of my job is to let the public know what we do.
Yeah.
And honestly, coming on a show like this, I would do this 7 days a week
Yeah.
if I had the opportunities. I just think it's important for folks. I talked to somebody the other day who was struggling about coming forward to report a crime, and for all the things that we talked about, of why they were worried about it,
Yeah.
coming into court, telling that story. What if we lose the case? I'm gonna feel like it's my fault. And one
Or
of the things.
targeted.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yep.
Yeah.
People think that
The
sometimes.
stigma,
The stigma,
yeah.
you know, maybe potential retaliation, all of those
Exactly.
things. Part of my job and part of victim witness is to walk people through this and say, look,
Yeah.
I can't give you a 100% guarantee, but here's what I can tell you is generally my experience.
Right.
And I have enough of the experience now that I think I can speak on
Yes.
with some authority on this. But it's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. You know, human behavior and trying to predict human behavior, very difficult things. Judges have tremendously difficult jobs.
Yes.
Yeah.
District attorneys
I don't envy
have
it.
difficult jobs.
Yeah.
You know, we can't predict human behavior. We don't have a crystal ball. We make the best decisions that we can. And honestly, some of the more difficult decisions are balancing, making sure that public safety is at the forefront, but also making sure that individual justice is looked at, that
served, yeah.
somebody might deserve a second chance for something. And
Yeah.
you know, you can't be so worried that, you know, the 1 in a million that, you know what, this might not
The
work.
ones that
Right,
make
right.
the news.
Yeah,
Right,
and those things
right.
happen.
Right.
And sometimes I think in any public job, as a police chief or rep, I think you have to have a bit of a thick skin too sometimes.
Yes,
Because,
absolutely.
you know, but you can't be afraid to make decisions. And you know, it's.
And that is
Yeah.
always the hardest part of
It
any
is.
job where there's any sort of leadership involved, is making a decision and being
Yeah.
able to stick with it with a clear conscience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the other populations, I think, that are, and we've addressed this through our shows, are veterans who are also very
Yes.
underserved. And
Yes.
addressing mental health, potential crime, homelessness,
Yeah.
and legislation, all of
Yes.
which is wrapped up in this ball that
And
I'm
these
sure
are
that, you know, how
right
do
up
you
there
address
with,
that?
Yes.
you know, with
Yeah.
first responders. These are the people
Exactly.
we want to help
Yeah,
the
your-
most.
Exactly.
Your question, I can't tell you how timely this is. So a week and a half ago, I spent the afternoon up in Lawrence District Court with Judge Gaffney, who runs the Veterans Treatment Court.
Oh,
And
nice.
This is good to know.
they showcased for me, again, this is part of the education of a great show like this. They talked about some of the great things they're doing for veterans. Folks that have served the country, raised their right hand, to sworn to protect us, and we need to repay that debt.
Yes.
And one of the things, and Judge Gaffney, I think, is a great example up in Lawrence Court, of understand the challenges that veterans, they're coming home after having some really difficult experiences and trying to assimilate right back into society. It's not always a
No.
perfect fit.
No, it's not.
And it's the understanding, it's the mental health piece, it's the substance use treatment.
Yes.
And honestly, knowing that, you know what, you're not gonna get it right the first time. and that sometimes folks need a second and third and
Yep.
fourth chance. And doing that in a way, again, that balances public safety,
Yep.
but also makes sure that we're treating the individual.
Yes.
Exactly.
So at the court the other day, we had the folks from Veterans Affairs were there, probation department. It's a real team effort. You know, oftentimes I think people think of the criminal justice system as this adversarial,
Yes.
you know, it's
Right.
people.
Well, that's the history, right?
Yeah,
That's
and the TV
history.
shows.
Yes.
Yes,
Right?
I was
Yes.
about to say.
Yes.
But this is a little different model, and they're doing some really incredible things for our veterans.
That's
And
great.
I think first it took the realization that veterans do need this sort of extra look, this
Yes.
special court. Once we
Yes.
get past that, okay, now what does this look like?
Right.
I just had a Zoom a couple days ago with Judge Chapman in Essex County and Judge Broadbent on starting a drug court in Salem. Again, recognizing that,
That'd be
you know, the
amazing.
folks that are suffering from substance use disorder may be manifesting itself in other types of crime, but at the root of it, it's the substance use
It's the
issue that's
substance
driving
use,
it.
Yeah.
And if we get it right and we can deal with that, the other things will take care of themselves.
Now, I have to ask, are these at the district court levels or the superior court levels?
Good question.
really good
So we're
question.
starting at district court,
Okay.
and I think the idea is that these are the folks that are coming into I call it the front door of the judicial system. They're coming into district court, it's the people's court, and let's see how we can do there. I think that this pilot program, I think it's best suited to start in the district
It
court.
makes sense, because
Yeah.
Superior Court is more violent crime.
It is,
Yeah.
it is. It's the upper end, particularly, you know, the violent crime, the more serious crime, serious felonies. And I think in the district court, I think they're much more suited to having this drug court. It's been successful in other courts, and I salute Judge Chapman. He's the first justice in Salem District for this initiative. So I was on, folks from my team, Sheriff Coppinger, Probation Department, some of the folks that are doing this work. So it's going to be a real team effort, and I'm really looking for some success. And again, Stacey, at your point, you mentioned a couple times the recidivism rate.
Yes.
This will help keep that down when it's
course.
successful.
Mo-
course,
Most
that's
definitely. In
great.
fact, I think after the show is taping, you and I are going to swap some information, because I'd love to get these judges on to talk
To
about
discuss
this.
That would be
Yeah.
phenomenal. It would be. And again, part of the education piece of a show like this.
And that's what we
the whole
learn
point of why
something
we're
new
here.
every show we
Yes.
bring on, because
And
we
it's-
don't necessarily know these
Yeah.
services are out
Yeah,
there.
and it's a springboard for us to bring, like you said, the judges, other guests, other nonprofits.
Yeah.
And obviously, we have the reach for North Andover, but the show goes on to other platforms like
Yes.
YouTube
Yep.
and Roku and all of that, where
Yep.
there's a much broader
So-
audience that can,
And once
this
it gets
info.
out on YouTube, we post it, and then once it's there, I can say,
whoever
You know,
wants to share it.
Sure.
it's there, and now you can send it to all the
Yep.
people you want in
Exactly.
all of Essex County and
Yep.
say, hey, I just did this show, can you share this with your people?
Send it through.
Send
Yep.
it through,
Yep, happy to do it.
and that's how we disseminate the information. We know that this show is followed by other sister commissions
Yes.
like
Yep.
ours.
Yep.
And they'll be like, well, we were grateful to hear about this because now we were
Yeah.
able
Yeah.
to notify.
Opens the door for
Yeah.
them.
Exactly.
I think it's great. So, for the townsfolk to hear about, like, the North Andover, the community support
Yes.
piece, and what your commission is doing. But it's not just for North Andover. This message, I think, this should go all the way across the Commonwealth.
Absolutely.
There isn't a city or a town or a family that hasn't been touched by all the things that we've talked about this morning.
Exactly.
Yes, it's
So-
very personal.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for
Yes.
being on
Appreciate
our
it.
show. Our
Thank-
time, unfortunately, it goes so quickly.
It does.
And we can always go hours on end
Please.
sometimes.
It's
I mean,
important, and
we're-
the fact that you're putting a spotlight on it, it means a great deal.
Well, thank you, and we would love to have you back on again
Great.
Yes.
because there's so much more
Great.
to discuss.
As
Thank
new
you.
programs roll out, please let us know, because we'd love to highlight those programs.
Terrific. Great.
Education is the best way to do it.
That's
Yes.
right. Thank you.
Thank you again.
You can reach out to the Essex County District Attorney's Office at 978-745-6610 and learn more about the office and their programs at essexcountyda.net. If you're looking for any Commonwealth government office, simply go to mass.gov and search for the office you're looking for.
Thank you to our crew from GLTS, Alex Santiago, GLTS alumni, Cassie Buono and John Kafari, And from North Shore Academy, Zachary Jones.
Unfortunately, our previously scheduled special taping with State Senator Barry Feingold was canceled, and we hope that Senator Feingold will be able to join us in the near future. December, we'll be joined by Waystone Health and Human Services. Our January guest will be Institute for Human-Centered Design. We have commitments from several guests, and we're working just to secure those dates as soon as possible. We're consistently looking for new topics to explore here at Ability Assistance, and we'd truly love to know what topics you'd like more information about. Please, you can email me directly at pjones@northandovermaa.gov or call me at 978-494-0136. In addition to watching through our cable station, you can catch all of our programs on demand. We've got YouTube, we've got the Cablecast app through Roku and Apple TV, we've got the North Andover CAM website, and if you don't have time to watch but you want to listen, you can always catch it all on podcast via Podbean. From all of us here at Ability Assistance, thank you. See you soon next month, and happy Thanksgiving.
That's right.
Happy
That's right.
Thanksgiving.